Smile 2 is the latest psychological horror film from Ohio-born director Parker Finn. The story follows Sky Riley, a pop star who's about to embark on a comeback tour 1 year after a very public incident derailed her entire life. Let me just start this review by saying I've been watching horror movies since I was around 8 years old. Like a lot of horror fans who grew up during the VHS days, it all started when my dad showed me John Carpenter's The Thing. Soon after that, I started appreciating contemporary horror films thanks to the Saw franchise. In early high school, I tried to seek out the most fucked up movies in existence, watching stuff like A Serbian Film and Guinea Pig 2. I'm no stranger to the horror genre, and for a long time, it felt like nothing could freak me out anymore. Add to that, I've got a bachelor's in film production, so my brain's fairly well trained in recognizing the artifice behind motion pictures. A friend of mine noted that once you start looking for quasar lights and missed focus pulls, the medium's never quite the same after that. Hopefully now that you've heard my background, you'll believe me when I say that true scares feel kinda hard to come by. Earlier this year, while watching The First Omen in theaters, my fight-or-flight response kicked in during a scene where Nell Tiger Free is trapped in a dark room with the ghost of a burn victim. It felt so refreshing being genuinely scared. And I proceeded to tell everybody I knew how good the movie was, because it had one scene that made me truly frightened. And that brings us back to Smile 2. Heads up, this is going to contain spoilers, because I think any discussion about this movie without spoilers is just an advertisement masquerading as a review. Before you go and close the video though, please heed these words. This movie is seriously fucking scary. If you're on shaky ground with horror movies and you think they might not be for you, please do not test the waters with this particular film. So I saw Smile 2 at the one Dolby Cinema theater in St. Louis. For those of you who aren't versed in premium large format venues, Dolby Cinema is the AMC theater chain's competitive answer to IMAX. While most theaters have a single projection system showing movies in 2K resolution, Dolby Cinema venues have a 4K dual laser setup, so the picture quality is off the fucking charts. But more important for this movie, Dolby Cinema theaters come equipped with somewhere between 48 and 64 speakers. Also, it supports 64 channels of sound, whereas IMAX systems top out at about 12 channels of sound. All this basically boils down to saying, I watched this movie at a state-of-the-art theater that makes IMAX look like bullshit. And there was a moment early on where it occurred to me that I might not actually be able to fully handle what this movie was throwing at me, particularly its sound design. It pains me to say this as a 30-year-old man, but I covered my ears just to dull some of those demonic, freaky noises and take a breather. But much to my shock, through my fingers in the tragus of each ear, the movie's sound was still crystal clear. Basically, I was fucked. Let's introduce a sort of fear scale, so I can properly communicate how fucked I was. Let's say there's a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the state of watching movies that feature zero frightening content at all. We're probably talking stuff like Amelie, Ponyo, Apollo 10.5. Then there's 10, which represents movies that mentally fuck you up so badly that you need to forcibly end your participation in the screening and go do something else. For me, I haven't experienced a 10 since I was in grade school, running up the basement stairs when the King Ramses episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog came on. In fact, most recent movies that seem to cause walkouts barely touch the top half of the scale for me. The Substance was a cakewalk. Evil Dead Rise barely registered on my radar. Hereditary was kind of a letdown, save for that one shot of the child's decapitated head covered in ants. That was cool. But Smile 2 was different. This movie can be firmly classified as a 9 on the fear scale. My heart was racing. I was constantly looking away from the screen. I fidgeted in my seat. And when the credits started to roll, I told my husband, we need to book it out of here before the music turns freaky. And we swiftly edged our way past the row of people who hadn't even stood up to leave yet. And seriously, when the pop songs started cutting out and getting replaced with freaky demon sounds, I felt like Indiana Jones getting away from that fucking boulder. I felt like somebody running away from a house party that just erupted into gunshots. Now, even though this movie did nearly give me a heart attack, it would be a real punk-ass move to blame a horror movie for trying to be scary. While I never want to see this again, I really respect a lot of the things that Smile 2 did in an effort to be frightening. The most fascinating tactic to me was using trailers to set up false expectations. Fans of the franchise will note, lots of people complained when Smile 1 came out that the best scare in the movie, the sister's swinging head, was spoiled beforehand in the trailers. Smile 2 improves on this by doing something kind of clever. In the trailers, they showed what appeared to be some fairly goofy looking shit. Guy getting hit by a car and the blood trails a smile. Some girl sleeping with the protagonist puts on a silly grin. Lewis whacking himself in the face with a weight like an anvil that's hit Wile E. Coyote. But the genius of all this, these are all just the setup scares that happen before the real scares. You learn this in the movies for a shot. Remember that guy getting run over by a car? The beginning of that trail of blood is actually littered with his body parts and guts. The girl in the bed? Yeah, after about 30 seconds of smiling, her mouth and eyes turn into scary Pennywise the Clown lights. And Lewis, oh my fucking god, his death is not quick and stupid like in the trailer. It is slow and heinous, like the fire extinguisher scene in Irreversible if the camera stayed completely still. You see this guy beat his face in until he is completely unrecognizable, and he's just staring dead into the camera for the whole thing. It is such a smart trick, and it absolutely fucked me up knowing the trailers set me up to significantly underestimate how intense each jump scare was going to be in the final product. Adding on to that, this movie saves some really insane imagery for the big finale. The Smile Monster does make a return, and in my opinion, that is probably the most frightening, fucked up looking monster in the history of movies. I know lots of folks have love for Motor from The Ritual or like the bear from Annihilation, but a gnarly, skinless humanoid with a mouth that's actually a tunnel of other mouths just takes the cake for me personally. They also made this whole thing where he rips the protagonist's mouth open significantly more gory in this one. And the sound they play when he's finishing off our main character had every fiber of my being screaming, "Get the fuck out of this theater! You idiot, you're gonna die here!" Special shout out though, continuing the trend of Parker Finn learning and growing as a scare salesman, folks may remember in Smile 1, the demon initially reveals itself looking like a kind of generic horror villain, some tall freaky lady with weird bone structure. This movie continues the trend of faking audiences out with a slightly less frightening boss fight that happens before we see the real Grim Reaper. It's nothing too crazy at first. The demon pretends to be this dark-haired, drug-addicted version of our protagonist from before she got her life together, except then they absolutely fucking obliterate you when she makes this terrifying face where her eyes start popping out. It made me feel like I was 10 years old again, seeing Captain Howdy in some Screamer prank video on E-Bomb's World. They really did take the few places that the first movie had issues and refine the material until everything was shit your pants level nuts. One thing they do in Smile 2 on a semi-regular basis is they start gradually playing the freaky demon sounds louder and louder until eventually it's completely overwhelming. And you're basically sitting there thinking, if this gets any louder or it doesn't end soon, I'm fucked. Fortunately, I survived these psychic attacks, but my BPM shot well into the triple digits at least a dozen times throughout the presentation. I can't even remember the last time I wanted to walk out of a horror movie just because it was freaking me out too much. In the opening credits where it says, "in association with bad feeling," the movie felt like some kind of malevolent creature that was trying to stare me down before it ate me alive. Beyond communicating the level of sheer terror I experienced, I do want to commend this picture for some of the technical things it did. The second shot in this movie is an LCD screen that's playing daytime television, and as the camera zooms in, it seamlessly fades into this close-up shot of the protagonist that's clearly being captured with cinema quality gear. They did a spectacular job emulating the cheap look of daytime television, and I have no idea how they blended that boring interview with the final close-up on Sky's face. But the shot is really incredible at communicating that this isn't some fake thing about a pop star, it's an actual tour of hell starring this particular, very real, young blonde woman. Naomi Scott does a really stellar job in this. I know some folks made fun of Nell Tiger Free's weird Isabella Adjani style possession dance in the first Omen, but you can't make an omelet without a few eggs. Some of the best material in film comes from actors putting themselves in weird, vulnerable positions. And in this film, there's a particular scene where Naomi Scott has to ugly cry, and it is properly tragic to witness. I would love to hear what her process was like trying to get to a place like that mentally while on a set. Also, hats off to the casting director for picking folks who could pull off the creepy smile. Smile 1 had a couple of instances where the smiling actor seemed just a little too camp, particularly that Brett Gelman looking "you're gonna die" dude hanging out on the bed. I can confidently say that every new actor who dons the titular smile in this movie rocks it in a creepy way. This admittedly is aided by the choice of lenses, the shot composition, and the drawn-out editing. The nearest we get to flying too close to the sun is Rosemary DeWitt, who, just like Robin Weigert's character in the first film, needs an extra little boost from the spooky demon voice to actually make the scene work. Quick side note, I would have loved it if Parker Finn had another character scream and peel their face off in this movie. There's a scene in Smile 1 where shit's hitting the fan, and right before real reality kicks back in, the demon pretends to be a guy, loudly ripping his own face off. That scene was so extreme and absurd at the same time, it reminded me of something that like a film school kid would write into an early draft of their screenplay as kind of a flippant joke with their buddies. There's nothing like that in here, sadly. Finally, massive shout out to the opening oneer with Kyle Gallner, where he tries to use the loophole from the original film to pass the curse onto somebody who he genuinely thinks deserves it. I'd actually forgotten that they discovered you can beat the demon by murdering a person in front of somebody else, but I was so impressed with Parker Finn's little action short film that I really wasn't stopping to think. It really does feel like the best part of the movie in a weird way, just because it's more fun watching a character in this franchise have that much agency while going up against the demon. And it's a fucking crazy long take with guns and Kyle Gallner, so it's basically cheating. If Parker Finn ever wants to direct a crime thriller, I'll be there opening night. That said, this is the last time I'm watching a Smile film in theaters. On the car ride home, my husband went full-on supernatural, talking about how this movie has a quantifiable evil energy that's unhealthy to expose yourself to. I don't know what sets this apart from other crazy shit like When Evil Lurks or Talk to Me or Barbarian or any of the other horror movies I've watched in my lifetime without any major issue at all. But for me, personally, Smile 2 is the most frightening thing I have ever seen in a theater. And one of the reasons I wanted to broadcast this review to YouTube is because I don't think any major reviewers are going to come on here and admit that this movie absolutely fucked up their whole evening. But on the off chance you're like me and you feel a little bit shocked by how effective this movie was, don't worry, you're not alone. Sometimes I watch movies like The Exorcist and I wonder, why did my grandparents think this was the devil incarnate? Why would anybody throw up or pass out because of this? And after watching Smile 2, it occurred to me, horror filmmaking is just like any other craft. The community can refine and build on what came before as if they were advancing some kind of dreadful technology. Kids in 2040 may watch Smile 2 and think it's fucking crazy that a grown man ever thought this movie was terrifying. But in this year, in 2024, Smile 2 is about as cutting edge as a scary mindfuck gets. It is nice, after all these years of watching horror movies, finally feeling like I got in at the ground level of something really frightening. That said, I think I've had my fill, and I really hope that Nosferatu is a little less aggressive than this was, because I don't want this experience to become a regular thing. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10 out of pure respect that it accomplished its goals above and beyond what I could have ever expected. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.